Our next presenter will tell us how CPG can turn speed into growth by using AI. He is Pete Reilly, SVP of Sales and Marketing at AnswerRocket. Pete, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Appreciate it, and excited to be here today to really talk to you guys about how we're helping CPGs leverage AI to just move faster, make better decisions, and ultimately to find growth. So it's no secret that basically at the top of every CPG's agenda is really about finding growth. Where are those growth opportunities? Where are some of those white spaces we can go after? Where are areas where maybe we're not winning as much as we should? And so how do I prioritize what we should spend our time and energy on as an organization? And so it's funny, when we first started AnswerRocket, we started asking around about how companies are doing this today. How are they leveraging data and insights to figure out where are their growth opportunities? And so what you learn as we went down this path is that pretty much everybody's got some version of a traditional, I'd say, BI or analytics tool, a Tableau or a Power BI or a Click or something like that. And these dashboards they were essentially game-changing when they first sort of came out, right? I mean, they're fantastic at taking information that you just sort of know. You need to understand every month in and out. I need to know what penetration is and market share, and I need to know sales and volume and so on, right? Of course. And so they're really, really good at helping you understand sort of what happened. But it's sort of within the context of things, how you understood your business months ago when somebody built these things. So when we started talking to folks in the CPG, in the CPG space, they would say, these are great, but you might see that market share is down, but the dashboard's not going to tell you why it was down, right? So you might have a question like this: so why is my market share down in laundry? And when we would talk to folks about this, I'd say, well, so what do you do when you have that question? They say, well, sometimes I don't ask the question. Sometimes I have to go get a technician for help to maybe extract the data in a different way, or maybe I'm even myself. If I'm really technical, maybe I can get into whatever syndicated data sources maybe I'm using, or internal data sources I'm using, and maybe pull those into Excel and go through and do a bunch of analysis and so on. Depending on your role in the company, you may actually have to turn to other folks, as I mentioned, sort of this idea that I have to kind of go get to folks that can get to data on the other side of the wall. And this is a picture of a DMV. You take a number and you wait. And so that was really the experience that we heard from a lot of people, where if they weren't skilled enough to kind of gather that data and pull into spreadsheets and analyze it themselves, very often they were waiting for other people to do that for them. And it wasn't so much that it takes that long to actually do the analysis necessarily, but it does sometimes take a while to essentially get your turn in line, if you will. And this is pretty much how it works across most of the world today, especially in the CPG space. But you contrast that with our lives as consumers. I just asked this on my Google Assist on my iPhone, where can I buy some laundry detergent? And I got a really, I got a very useful answer, right? And so as consumers, we're really used to this idea of being able to just, interact with information pretty seamlessly. I mean, we have Google Home, at home, and we ask it questions all the time. And it's just really so much easier as in our consumer world to get access to information and insights. Now, another sort of interesting thing has sort of developed over the last couple of years, and in 2016 there was a company called DeepMind. And DeepMind was based in the UK. They've actually been recently bought by Google, and they built an artificial intelligence engine by the name of Alphago. And it was basically, it learned essentially how to play the game of Go, and it defeated actually the world champion at the time, Lee Sedol, 4-1. It actually went on to beat every other player that had ever played, and retired, quote unquote, some number of a couple of years later. What's really interesting about this is that most experts in AI and machine learning didn't expect this to happen for another decade. And so to us, and I think to a lot of people, this represented really this fundamental step change in the capabilities of AI and machine learning. And our perspective was, we need to bring that to basically allow humans to and essentially augment humans' ability to understand and analyze their data so we can make decisions faster, and in the case of CPGs, find growth. Now, one of the things that happens when we talk about AI and machine learning, a lot of folks are like, "Hey, I'm a little worried, and should I be worried?" and so on. We like to talk about it as sort of think of it as Iron Man versus Terminator, right? So these are tools that just essentially give you superpowers, right? They essentially give you the ability to understand really quickly what's going on in your industry, what's going on in your business, what's going on with your competitors, where are those white space opportunities, in time to actually take advantage of that insight and drive growth. Gartner Group is obviously a global, really well-respected technology consulting organization, and they've essentially coined this phrase of augmented analytics. And basically, what they're saying is there's this idea of this approach where you automate the generation of insights, you automate analysis using machine learning, AI, and natural language generation, which is essentially telling stories, is being really this next wave. We obviously agree we're a part of that wave, and that's where where we think a lot of the opportunity for CPGs lies today. A few key elements that you should look for in any solution like this. One is it should be driven by natural language. I should be able to do search. I should be able to use various devices. I should be able to talk to this capability. And it should automate analysis. It should automate the process you follow around understanding what your market share was and why it is what it is and why it changed and what your competitors did and so on. And I'll show you some examples of that here in a minute. And it needs to be consumer goods aware. There are really some significant challenges in terms of handling syndicated data at various depths, synchronizing that with your finance data that may be at different depths, and which AI or machine learning to use for which analysis, depending on what problem you're trying to solve. So those are some key elements to look for. And when we talk about AnswerRocket, we like to think of it as an AI-driven CPG analyst. This is sort of this person at your side. They can essentially augmenting your capabilities. The key is getting from understanding to action 10 times faster, an order of magnitude faster. And at the end of the day, that speed of understanding what's happening in the market and the ability to be able to react to it faster than the competition is what's going to be able to to drive this growth. I was talking to one category management VP at a large beverage company, and what he said was, he says, we spend 80% of our time on causation. We spend 80% of our time trying to figure out what happened, and only 25% of our time on ideation. What should we be doing? How do we get creative? How do we help this? How do we help this retailer in this category? And how do we find our growth opportunities? And with AI, it sort of flips that, right? We go from 80% causation time to 20% causation time. Now we understand what happened. Now we understand where the opportunities are, and now we can do what humans are really, really good at. Humans are not great at combing through lots of data and doing a lot of math, right? They're really great at being creative and coming up with ideas about how do we drive growth in this market, in this segment, in this geography, and so on. We're working with 3 of the top 10 fast-moving consumer goods companies, and this is probably outdated at this point. A lot more sort of growing every day, thanks to our partners around the world. We are a Nielsen connected partner, and so we work extremely well with Nielsen. We're not exclusive to that data set, but we have a great partnership with them, and we know a lot about how to help CPGs leverage that data and combine that with AI. And data is the thing that powers this, right? To find growth. And we're also a Gartner Cool vendor in 2017. One of our largest consumer goods customers has been just a great partner for us is Unilever, and I think we even have some great resources on our website if you're so interested. We've got some interviews with Stan Standenathan, who is their Senior VP of Insights there, and some other case studies and information if you are interested. And so with that, I'm going to stop hammering you with PowerPoint slides, and we're going to jump into a demo, okay? So I'm going to jump over here to Google Chrome. And so this is, oh wait, I got to share, hold on. Let me work on that. Here we go. 1 second. All right, I think Should be coming up in just a second. Awesome. Okay. And so this is AnswerRocket. And so the idea is, the first idea that we sort of started with is, how do we make this ability to sort of go through my data, understand what's going on in my data, just more like the consumer experience. So for us, it really just starts with search. And this particular data set that I have actually has gum data. And if I just open up sort of the left-hand side here, we can see we have things like around distribution, market share, price promotion, sales and volume, and so on. And different dimensions that I have available to me, obviously dates and times and markets and products, brands, categories, and so on. Okay. Now I don't need to necessarily know all that, but it's useful to just know, where I can go find what it is that AnswerRocket knows. And we have, as I mentioned, some gum data from the U.S. That we can sort of ask about that we downloaded from Nielsen's AOD platform. So with that, and again, you can connect to any data source. It's not restricted to that. This could be used for your finance data, your supply chain data, your finance data. Increasingly, as we're working with large CPGs, they're combining that together because that's really where you're going to get some extremely powerful insights. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of ask a question. These are just sort of some ways that people can scroll through and just see some sample questions. But you can just start typing. I can say, what were the top 5 brands? And I want to do that by market share. And you'll notice as I start, I'll pause there for a second. You'll notice it's sort of trying to provide me with some suggestions. It's actually telling me what it thinks I want. So it thinks I want the top 5 brands by sales value, so it defaulted to sales value for 2018 and so on. But if I want to look at market share, and I actually want to see growth, and I want to see that for last year. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter on that question. And you'll see very quickly we get an answer back. And here it's telling me, again, what did it provide me? And we can see Icebreakers did extremely well. They grew 180 basis points, Tic Tac, Mentos, and so on. Now, I don't have to sort of keep asking questions. I can simply go ahead and click on this and traditional sort of visualization capabilities. Let's look at this by 4-week period and see how they did over the course of the year. And what you'll see here is we sort of peak out in our market share growth. So they're growing. All this is essentially good news, but their growth has sort of started slowing down. Okay, and what we can see here in this Show Insights capability is if I click on that, it will actually, when you ask a question, these insights, and this is talking about natural language generation, which I mentioned on the Augmented Analytics slide from Gartner. The system is dynamically looking at the data that I've asked for upon its return, doing some analysis on the data, and presenting this to me and basically telling me a story about what's happening, right? So here's the change for the 13 4-week periods, average 1.79% per period, and so on. And we can see in the most recent period, value share absolute change is 1.17%. It's actually down. That growth is down from a little bit from a year ago. And then we can actually see we're starting to do some forecasting here as well. So this could be extremely simple way to just get some insights out of the data. We even have a way to create essentially a PowerPoint out of this and present those insights as well. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And if you don't like this particular chart, there's all sorts of other ways you can sort of take a look at the data, even if you just want to get to the raw data source as well. And I'll just ask 1 or 2 other questions. And for these, I'll just sort of use so you don't have to see me mistype a bunch of words. Why don't we can type a few of these. But the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to ask about really a much more sophisticated question, right? So it's interesting and valuable to see what market share growth is by month, but we want to know, it was funny, as we started working with CPGs, they just want to know how something did, right? So I'm very curious about that period 8 that we saw on the Icebreakers chart. So I want to ask it, how did Icebreakers do in P8 2018? And essentially what's happening behind the scenes, this is where we use generally AI to understand my question in the form of natural language processing, and then we go ahead and query the database and bring it back. So that's a form of it. Also, under AI is this whole field of machine learning. We're leveraging, for this particular question, we're leveraging machine learning to automate a process that might take you days. Okay, and this is what get back to that whole speed and how do I use speed to find growth. And this can look lots of different ways depending on your use case and your business. But we have a lot of these out-of-the-box capabilities in AnswerRocket. And what it's showing me here is it defaulted to do an analysis versus the same period a year ago. And what we can see here in this box is a sales value is $35.6 million, up 23.1% over a year ago. And this chart in the background is sort of this watermark showing me that month-by-month change. And in this particular example, again, this can be set up depending on whatever data you have. It's set up to just look at sales units, unit price, promo sales volume, non-promo sales volume, and TDP. And these even have subcomponents as well. So at a quick glance, I can sort of see what's going on. But we also talked about natural language generation. I want to see the story. Well, here's the story. And for icebreakers in that period, the sales value was up $35.65 million, reached that number, up 23.1%, $6.69 million versus a year ago. And you can see, and it's starting to describe to me why, what were the main drivers. Now, of course, everything was up sort of across the board here. And what it'll also do is look at contributing factors and contradicting factors. So what helped me, what didn't, what worked against me. These are determined by a machine learning algorithm. For any techies in the group, there's one called gradient boost, which we use for this particular use case. But we can really use anything. And Mint was up, and these are sorted by the dollar impact. So Mint was up $4.36 million. Total U.S., including convenience, was up $4.32 million. And again, here's why. And here's sort of the primary drivers. Right now, the primary driver here was non-promo sales units were up. We'll also see here fruit was up, but fruit was supported by non-promo sales unit increase in total convenience and so on. And we can see bubble gum. Nobody's chewing bubble gum anymore, unfortunately. But fruit is doing great. So now, if I look at this, I might say, well, that's sort of interesting. What's going on in convenience? I can also link other automation of analysis to this question. So let's say I'm very curious about. Well, that's interesting. Tell me more about the market share specifically in convenience. And because I can invoke this using a natural language question, I could ask about just bubblegum in U.S. convenience, or I could ask about bubblegum across the whole U.S., or I could ask about a particular flavor. And it really just has that kind of flexibility to invoke this analysis. And this is not a simple report. This is actually machine learning and AI happening under the covers to figure out what is the right answer to these questions. And so in this particular case, our value market share is 8.1%. We're up 241 basis points. In this slide, we're seeing some text describing what's going on. So we're continuing the recent trend, and the value share movement compares favorably to the long-term trend. And we can see last 12 months, we can see year-to-date, we can see last 3 months, and we can see period 8. Okay, and this is really, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to determine this. This is what drove that growth. And so we can see here, we're driven heavily by an improvement in distribution, which is fantastic. Our price sort of worked against us, but promotions helped us a lot more than any price changes that we made, and there were some other factors as well. And so there's a lot going on under the covers to do this dynamically on the fly instead of going to some sort of static report. Now below here, what we also did is we used machine learning to determine what are the top opportunities. And so you can see here, if you look at this bottom axis, this is talking about the segment growth. So to the left, segment is shrinking. To the right, segment is growing. And on this axis, what is my brand doing? Lower is shrinking, upper is growing, right? And so we can see here, we've got sort of in the middle. The good news is our brands are growing, which is fantastic. The segment is slightly negative. It looks like the fruit segment is actually slightly up, but it's not as impactful. And so the point of this is to sort of highlight, here are sort of your growth opportunities. Here are things you should go prioritize to go work on. Again, in that theme of speed driving growth. We had one a woman that we work with, actually, she's on our team, and she said, it would take me days to get this analysis just to figure out what it is that I should go do. And parts of this I wouldn't even ask for because I knew it would take me too long to get, and here you get it in about a minute or so. We'll also describe what's happening to you in a full narrative form. And this is a really quick way to sort of assess, what are my top gainers? We'll have decliners if that applies here as well in terms of dollar opportunity. And just really quickly, I have an idea. What are my priorities? What do I need to go drive? What should I invest in? And frankly, how much is it worth it for me to invest? And again, I can look at these breakdowns. And here, these are just some different views by channel and segment. But under the covers, the machine learning algorithm is actually looking at every single sort of view of this to determine this narrative in this summary. Now, when you do ask these questions, you can also build a dashboard of sorts. You'll notice I have this dashboard. I can save it. I can share it. I can use it every day if I want. And then finally, what I wanted to point out is, there are a lot of use cases where you're sitting in a meeting and you just need to know sort of what's going on, right, in a different area. So here I've popped up. This is my phone, and hopefully my wife won't text me about my car because it's in the shop. But we'll see. And a couple of key concepts here. You can see these headlines here, and the idea is we've shown you a lot about how to ask a question and get an answer really quickly. But frankly, well, why should I have to ask the question, right? The machine is really good at looking at the data on my behalf. I can have the machine sort of keep an eye on my business for me and tell me what's important, and based on preferences I've indicated and other things I've looked at. So here I'm interested in Cadbury and Mentos, and it's giving me a couple of key insights. And I can engage with that. I touch that button here, and I can get more information. This is essentially that market share analysis that we ran, but the idea here is I didn't have to ask for it. It's sort of running when the data is updated and letting me know when it sees some trend that it thinks that I should be interested in. And you can see some text at the bottom describing what's happening there, obviously a chart. Here's the key. We'll get to the key drivers that we've talked about and the breakdowns as well. Okay, and then finally, what you also want to be able to do is ask a pretty simple question like, what were Icebreaker's sales by month last year? Okay, so it didn't like Icebreaker there, so I'll go ahead and we'll just give it one more try. What were Icebreaker's sales by month last year? And there's more you can do to configure the system. If those get bunched together a lot, the system can certainly learn to respond to those things. And so here's the sales value for the 4-week period. Here are the insights that we've shown you guys before. And so just get this quick hit of information. If you don't have your laptop with you, you can get an alert about something that's really important to you. Or you can just jump in here and ask, when the CEO says, hey, what's our market share, or what have you, you can just go ahead and get an answer to that question instantaneously. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the slides, I think. Oh, and stop sharing. Cool. Great. So that's really what I wanted to share with you guys today in terms of how do you leverage AI to find growth if you're a consumer goods company, and hopefully you've seen some, at a very minimum, some things that are sort of really intriguing and perhaps even surprising to you guys. And I can tell you we're doing this with some of the largest CPGs on the planet, and would love to answer any questions that you guys have about this.
Sure. We have some questions that came in, Pete. Do you think AI will replace marketing teams in the future, and how soon?
Yeah, great question. We get it all the time, and that was the reason I have the Iron Man slide up there. Because again, and I don't know if I'm still sharing my screen, but again, the idea is that it's not about replacing; it's about augmenting. And what we're seeing when we go into large consumer goods companies, what they're interested in, they're not interested in, how do I cut out people. What they're interested in is how do I find growth? How do I drive the top line, which will then obviously flow through to the bottom line. And if you go back to my other chart about what people see the benefit as, we spend enormous time, honestly, just wasting human potential and energy, combing through data, answering these questions, things that we're not good at. And what this does is it really allows us to sort of basically leverage our full potential as humans, honestly.
Okay, Pete, here's a real interesting question. How can we convince leadership to invest in AI?
Great question. It's all basically it's all about ROI. And I can tell you because I have to do this all the time, right? It's well, what's the value? What's the value prop? And as we come, and one of the reasons I actually had this title for the slide is because that is how companies that engage with us are justifying their investment. They look at what we're doing, and they understand that they can greatly increase the capabilities of their team and really sort of unleash this human potential to find those growth opportunities. So most of our ROIs that we build to justify, and in partnership with our customers, is this idea of, you know what, with a tool like this, I'm going to free up enough resources where I can actually have a fairly significant, 50, 100 plus basis points on top line growth, which is a very significant impact for most of the companies that we're dealing with.
Okay, a question that just came in here. Does AnswerRocket disrupt jobs for data analysts and data scientists?
Yeah,
and I guess that's
good
the question everyone wonders about, that, and whether it's behind the scenes or even in stores. You have robots in the stores replacing people.
Yeah, so sure. Yeah, actually it's a great question, because one of the really, if you remember that market share analysis I showed you and just sort of the brand performance analysis that I showed you, those are really built by people who are data scientists. And when we talk to data scientists, one of the things they really struggle with is they go to all this time to build these models. Maybe it's a churn model or a brand growth, an opportunity identification model or something. And then what ends up happening is they end up spending enormous parts of their day answering questions from the business, like, oh, hey, could you run it this way? Hey, could you run it that way? Hey, I'm looking at this category. I'm looking at this geography. I'm looking at this product. And the data scientist is like, great, now I'm just like, I sort of run, now I created this great analysis, I really want to do the next one, and I'm just spending all day sort of running this thing. So think of AnswerRocket as a way to take these capabilities of data scientists and sort of magnify them, right, and democratize the things that they do, and that's where you're going to really get the benefit to the enterprise, and that's how you're going to find growth, not because I can call Bill, because remember the DMV picture, right? Well, now all of a sudden, if Bill's the only person that can do that, then now I'm all we're waiting at the line, with Bill, and instead of giving this to everyone and enabling to foolproof way that's fully compliant with all the security and scalability and the data of the company, it just really, to me, gives data scientists and data analysts sort of this platform to really magnify their capabilities.
Okay. The questions are coming in fast and furious here, Pete, so buckle up.
Right,
is AnswerRocket only for CPG?
No, it's not. It's a great question. We did start there as a company only because it's really important when you're launching something as disruptive as AnswerRocket to focus on a really powerful use case. And we just felt that there was so much benefit to CPGs in leveraging this technology that it was just a great place to start, honestly. And then with companies like Unilever and others that we're working with, we have found that to be true. And also with some of the challenges with syndicated data and other things, it's actually not as easy as you think, which gives us some great competitive sort of differentiators, I guess, in the market. But what I will say is that many of our customers approach us outside of that space. We're doing a lot of work in the finance space with some really large financial institutions. They approach us a lot. We're starting to do more and more in the retail space as well. So AnswerRocket is not CPG specific. We're CPG strong, very strong, but it's really a platform that's applicable very horizontally.
Okay, next question. Is the underlying data sourced by AnswerRocket, or does it vary based on what data the client has access to?
Yeah, good question. It varies. It's B. It varies based on what data the client has access to. So if you buy Nielsen data and you have supply chain data and you have SAP, ERP or something, as long as whatever data you have available to you to make decisions, AnswerRocket can be used to make that accessible using Augmented Analytics and automate analysis process across all that data.
Okay. Next, what kind of questions can AnswerRocket automate?
Okay. I do see a comment that says somebody's no longer hearing audio, so hopefully, can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Okay, good deal. Yeah, so your question was, what kind of processes can we automate? Here's what I would tell you. Go look for a PowerPoint that somebody went through Excel, spent a bunch of time pulling data, building some charts, and throwing in PowerPoint and threw some charts in there. Those are processes, if you have the data, those are processes that you can and should automate. We have one company that we've talked to that literally does, hundreds of thousands of these. And as they looked at them, they said, there's really 7 big questions that we generally are trying to answer. So let's A, standardize that, and B, automate that. And what that does is not only does it speed things up tremendously, it removes bias, it removes error, it brings everybody up to this this analytical standard that's supported back to that augmented, Iron Man picture, right? So it basically makes everybody Iron Man and puts everybody on the same playing field. So in giving you a much more sort of reliable and a much more consistent analysis of the business, supported by AI and machine learning.
Okay. How is AnswerRocket different from other analytics tools on the market?
Yep. I would say in a couple of ways, but the biggest way, right? If I leave you with one thing, how's it different? We know of no other tool really that allows you to automate entire analysis processes. There's plenty of tools where you can build dashboards. There's plenty of tools, frankly, where you can ask a natural language question and get some data back. But there are very few tools that put the power of AI and machine learning in the form of automating processes that might take days or even weeks in the hands of business people.
Okay. Do you have any predictions for how AI will impact CPGs in the next 5 years?
That's a good question. I would say this, based on what I see, and because of sort of the competitive pressures in the CPG space to find growth, I actually think CPG will will start to become much more of a leader. I think in the past, maybe it has not been as much from a technology perspective. But I think a couple of things are going to happen with CPGs. They're going to understand the power of AI and machine learning to help them find these opportunities, and frankly, in a very competitive world. I think number two, because of that, they're going to realize the power, the necessity to actually gather their data and harmonize their data in a way that AI can leverage it and access it and make it more fully available to the company. And I think CPGs are going to be a key leader, sort of driving a lot of that change in the business world.
Okay, our last question here. We know what happens when Alpha plays chess against a human. What happens when Alpha plays chess against Watson?
I don't know if I've seen Alpha play chess against Watson, so I don't know if I know the answer to that question. But what I can tell you is this: there's a new story coming out literally like every day, and one of the ones that sort of caught my attention is there's a video game. It's called Dota, D-O-T-A 2, I believe. And what I just saw, I think 2 days ago, is there was an AI that learned Dota by watching Dota, and all of a sudden, and now is beating humans at this game. So, this is a very fast evolving space. And the thing that really powers AI is data. Frankly, and horsepower, right? So as you see the greater, and I've seen stats that say data's doubling every year, right? A lot of that's being driven by mobile. So that's a huge component and a driver to this capability. And the other one is this availability of massive computing power, which as we all start to move to the cloud or private cloud and so on, that's really a huge enabler for these capabilities. So will Alphago, beat the IBM machine? I don't know. But what I do know is the capabilities are growing dramatically, literally on a daily basis. And the companies that jump on that and take advantage of that sooner are going to have a huge advantage.
Okay, and one more. Are your clients using AI on the fly during sales meetings to answer retailers' questions?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's a very quick answer, and it's a good answer.
Sorry.
So,
simple answer.
Thank you. Well, thank you all the attendees for that flurry of questions that Pete handled very well. If you have more questions, please email Pete at AnswerRocket.com. Thank you, Pete. That was excellent.
Thanks, everybody.